Hey, and welcome back to another video. This is the 10th episode of the story where there are so many things that we as humans are unaware of, or lack an understanding. The bijou are one of those things. Follow the journey of Naruto Uzumaki as he befriends the yokai that was sealed inside of him and she helps him grow stronger. Please support by liking and subscribing. Let's start the show. Kevin Swift finds his entire world turned on its head when the gorgeous vixen, Lillian Nevem, decides that he is the perfect mate for her. Yesterday, the only thing Kevin had to worry about was turning his next homework assignment in on time and gathering what meager courage he has to ask his secret crush, Lindsay Diane, out on a date. All of that changes when he finds a small, injured fox with two tails and decides to take it home with him. Turns out that small fox is not a fox at all, but a kitsune, a supernatural creature found in Japanese mythology and folklore that can shape-shift from a fox into a drop-dead gorgeous red head that defines the term smokin' hot. Want to know what's even more interesting? This kitsune has fallen head over heels in love with Kevin and is willing to do anything to make him love her back. Too bad our hapless hero has a serious case of cannot talk to women. Sounds interesting, right? I hope you guys will enjoy reading it as much as I enjoyed writing it when it comes out. And now that I have thoroughly bored you to tears with my ecstatic ranting, I will let you do what you came here to do and read the next chapter of Story of the Ten-Tailed Wolf. Enjoy. Chapter 25, The Beautiful, the Bad, the goddamn hideous. Guren's lip curled in distaste as she walked down the dark, dank hallway to the central laboratory where the person she was searching for would most likely be found. She never did like these darkened corridors. They simply weren't fit for someone as beautiful as her. This particular corridor was even worse because it was dripping wet and smelled of raw fish. She hated the smell of raw fish. Or raw anything for that matter. Upon reaching the end of the corridor, Guren was met with a large door, which she opened upon reaching. On the other side of the door was a large room lined with glass containers and test tubes that were full of odd-looking creatures, most of which were dead, with only a few that still had life in them. Guren walked right past the containers without even bothering to look at their contents. She was more than used to seeing some of Orochimaru's experiments, and the sight did not bother her. Standing near a terminal that was situated in front of one of the containers that contained a particularly lively specimen was the person she was searching for. He looked like he was cataloging data or doing something else that involved his research. Guren did not care for any of that. She had no interest in research. Amachi, Guren said, causing the man to turn around. Ah, Guren, Amachi smiled amicably, though, Guren could tell it was fake. Back from your hunt. Have you taken care of our pest problem? Unfortunately, they were stronger than expected and managed to catch me off guard, Guren replied with a bit of a scowl. She hated admitting to any kind of failure or weakness, even if it was to someone who was far inferior to her. But I wouldn't worry too much. Now that I know what they are capable of, I'll be able to handle them much more easily when we fight again. That's good to know, Amachi said breezily, as if he did not really care what Guren said. It was an action that caused the woman standing before him to scowl. Let me know if you need any help. While I have yet to actually complete my research, I have managed to create several creatures that should prove useful as aquatic cannon fodder. Guren was about to reject the man's offer out of hand when she paused. I believe I may have some use for these creations of yours, she said after several seconds of silent contemplation. I am glad to see my creations can be of some use. Amachi gave Guren a pleased smile that had a hint of something Guren couldn't quite identify. She did not like that look, but as he was not doing anything that would be considered treason against Orochimaru, she did not say anything. Come, let me show you some of my creations. Story of the Ten-Tailed Wolf. After the battle against the Crystal User, Anko and Haku made their way to Mother Island. Because their skiff had been destroyed, they'd been forced to water walk the rest of the way. It had been trying, to say the least. Anko had decently large reserves that were a bit above the average Jonin and Haku was around the level of a Chunin. Neither of them were chakra monsters. Certainly, they had nowhere near the amount of chakra Naruto and Akane had. By the time they had arrived at the shore, Haku's chakra was nearly depleted and Enko was starting to feel a bit tired as well. "What should we do now?" asked Haku, breathing heavily. The walk had taken its toll on him, and the ice user was about ready to pass out right then and there. Only his experience with similar situations due to his being on the run from Hunter Ninja for several years kept him from falling asleep in the middle of the port. And speaking of the port, Haku took a moment to glance around at the place they had arrived at. It was very empty. Save for a few boats and vessels stationed there, the place was bereft of anything resembling life. This was not surprising. With it being so laid out, everyone was likely already asleep. "We need to find a place to stay for the night," Enko answered. As she said this, she began walking into the port town. Haku did not hesitate to follow the woman as she continued speaking. "Our meeting with the shipping company is tomorrow, so we'll want to be well rested for that. Thankfully, it's not until noon, so we should be able to get a full 8 hours of sleep before we have to meet with them." "What about Naruto-san and Akane-san?" "Those two will be fine," Enko spoke with complete surety. "I can't see either of them being killed by a couple of two-bit demons." "Can you?" Haku paused for a moment, thinking. A second later he shook his head. "No, those two are the strongest people I've ever met. I doubt anything short of the world ending would be enough to put them down." Story of the Ten-Tailed Wolf. It was still dark when Naruto and Akane arrived on Mother Island. The sun had been down for several hours now, making the duo suspect it was actually very early in the morning. The streets were completely empty. There was not a soul in sight as the two walked down the road. Though, given the hour, this was kind of understandable. Who would be up this late anyways except for party-goers looking to get drunk? No one, that's who. "I'm sure that Enko and Haku are already here," Naruto said, turning his head this way and that as he spoke, surveying their new surroundings. The place really wasn't all that different from any other port town they had visited, or any other town for that matter. "We should probably find them." "I agree," Akane nodded at his words, emphasizing her agreement with his basic plan of action. "Though, they are more than likely asleep. Which would make sense, since it was so laid out and everything. Still, it shouldn't take me too long to find them." "No need," Naruto sniffed the air a couple of times, a smile creeping on his face. He nodded to himself, once, then looked at his mate and grinned. "I've already found them." With a smile that matched his, Akane kicked her feet off the ground. She followed Naruto, her form a mere blur to the world around them, as he made his way towards where he scented Enko and Haku. It didn't take Akane long before she also began to smell the pair in the air. They both had very distinctive scents. Enko smelled of dango, red bean paste and snakes, and Haku smelled like senbon, oil and exotic herbs. Very few beings in this world would have a scent even remotely similar to theirs. The pair found Enko and Haku on the second floor of a small inn. The rooms only had a single bed, which Enko was sleeping on. Their ice-using friend was sleeping on the floor in a futon. The two immortal beings looked at each other and smiled. It was a very mischievous smile. Poor Enko. Story of the Ten-Tailed Wolf. As night turned into day, a number of people began to rouse from their slumber. These people were those who needed to get an early start on their day if they wanted their businesses to be ready in time for the morning rush. Bakers, shop owners, stall owners, all the people who sold some kind of product or service had gotten up bright and early, just as the sun began to rise, in order to prepare their shop, store or stall for the new day. One particular stall owner was setting up his own stand near a random hotel. He was an old man, with a slouched back due to years of bad posture and age, and a lot of wrinkles lining his face and bald head. His clothing was about what you would expect from an old man, plain gray pants, white shirt and a red vest over it. Truly, there was nothing remarkable about this man. As the old man set up his small stall, which sold taiyaki, he hummed a small tune to himself. It was a simple tune, one that he had known ever since his childhood. His mother used to sing it to him back when he was nothing more than a child, and it was one he had sung to his own children and their grandchildren. You could say this song had been in his family for a long time. It was while he was humming this song that his daily routine was interrupted. Kaya! A loud scream pierced the morning air. The shrill, whistle-like shriek was loud enough and sharp enough that several windows to the hotel his stall was in front of shattered like, well, glass. Even a few of the windows that belonged to the buildings on either side of the hotel shattered, raining glass fragments upon the ground below. Despite being old, the man who suddenly found mass amounts of sharp, deadly projectiles raining down on him was startlingly quick to react. Like a frightened animal that just heard the bang of a gun going off, he dove underneath the table. Huddling up, he wrapped his arms around his legs and pulled his knees to his chest as the tink, 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 tink sound of 1,000 shards of glass raining down on his stand echoed within the small space underneath. When the sounds of glass clattering against the wood of his stall ended, the old man stayed underneath, waiting. He waited for several more seconds before poking his head out to look around. His old, wizened eyes surveyed the area, looking left, then right, up and then down. When he saw nothing more than the wood of his stall, the wall of the hotel and the broken glass that now littered the street, he carefully stepped out from underneath his stall. Just as he was about to restart setting up his stall, the old man saw something that made him stop everything. Looking down at the wooden grain of his stall, the old man could see what had to be at least several hundred glass shards embedded into the wood. Like tiny claws belonging to the minions of hell trying to claw their way to the surface world, these glass shards looked like sharp, pointed nails jutting from the wooden board. The old man scratched the back of his head and sighed. This is going to take a while to clear away. Story of the ten-tailed wolf. Akane, Enko, Haku and Naruto found themselves walking down the street, all of them looking to be in a variety of different moods. The two immortal entities were grinning from ear to ear with an expression that let anyone within walking distance see how pleased they were with themselves. Of course, if you were to ask either one of them, they would gladly tell you they had every right to be pleased. On the other hand, Haku was looking quite exasperated, messaging his forehead as if to try and stall a coming headache. And at the other end of the spectrum was Enko, whose face was so red it could be mistaken for a hot forge. There was also an angry scowl on her lips to go along with her atomically flushed cheeks. "Ah, come on, sensei," Naruto said, grinning when he saw Enko visibly shudder as he emphasized the word sensei. "It was just a little harmless fun, and besides, you really should be used to us sneaking into your bed by now. I don't see why you would have a problem with it anyways." Akane giggled like some kind of schoolgirl. It was very uncharacteristic of her, but she was having so much fun at the moment that the OCness was perfectly understandable. "I mean, you have the hottest stud this side of the elemental nations and the most desirable woman on the planet in your bed. What right do you have to complain? Stow it. Both of you." At hearing Enko's angry answer, the two grinned at each other before proceeding to snicker into their hands. Of course, the way they did so ensured that Enko could hear them, thus increasing the amount of red currently present on the face of the woman with dark purple hair. Haku just sighed deeply as he watched and listened to the antics of his teammates. "I wonder if it's too late to ask Hokage-sama if I can transfer teams." The four shinobi were currently walking down the now bustling roadway of the port town on Mother Island. With the sun now shining down on the little city, the people had finally decided to get up and begin their day. There were people crowding the streets, shopping at various stalls and stores, and eating out at open-air cafes as they laughed and conversed with friends and family. Several children could be seen running through the street, playing a game of tag most likely, weaving between the legs of people much taller than they were. It was this crowd that the group of ninja waded through as they made their way inexorably to their destination. Said destination was a large building that was designed in the traditional architecture most often found in the elemental nations. Unlike the more modern buildings, which were actually a more recent development that had caught on around a century ago when outsiders first set foot onto this land. The traditional buildings were built more along the lines of what you would expect from some of the more rural areas of the continent. The group made their way up the steps, towards the large set of wooden double doors. As the one in charge, Anko was in the lead. The moment they reached the door, she knocked on it exactly 3 times, the banging of which could be heard echoing inside of the building. A few seconds later the door was opened and a young man stood on the other side. "Can I help you for?" he asked. "We're the shinobi your company hired for the protection detail," Anko informed the man, who couldn't be older than 18 or so. As she said this, she also held out a small scroll that contained the details of their mission, along with the official seal of Konoha and the signature of both the Hokage and the man who had asked for the mission. The young man unrolled the scroll and read through it. Nodding to himself, he then rolled the scroll back up and handed it back to Anko. "Everything seems to check out. Please, come inside and I will show you." To the ship's financial administrator. The group walked inside and followed the young man. As they moved through the small, narrow hallway, they took note of how the decor on the inside matched the architectural style on the outside exactly. It was all very traditional, tatami flooring, paper walls and sliding shoji doors. Their sandaled feet clacked excessively against the floor, creating a staccato symphony as they were led to one sliding door in particular. Kneeling down, the young man opened the door a crack and poked his head inside. "The group from Konoha is here to see you," he announced to whoever was inside. While Anko and Haku were unable to hear the answer, Akane's and Naruto's sense of hearing was more than acute enough to pick up someone from inside the room granting permission for them to enter. They were therefore unsurprised when the young man fully opened the door and looked up at them. "You may go in now." Walking into the room, the 4 Konoha shinobi studied the interior, which was just a standard meeting room that most business transactions of this nature took place in. Really, the only thing interesting about the room wasn't even the room itself, but the samurai standing guard along the far wall and the man sitting in seiza behind a low-rising wooden table. "You must be the Konoha shinobi," the man said by way of greeting. "I am pleased to see you all made it here safe and sound. Please, take a seat and we can get down to business." While Anko moved forward to sit right in front of the table, Akane, Haku and Naruto took their seats behind her, as dictated by protocol. Sometimes, being listed as a genin in the Konoha ranking books really sucked. While they made themselves comfortable, the whiskered member of their group took this time to study the man who had hired them for this mission. He was fairly old. Naruto judged him to be past his middle ages, likely somewhere around 50 or maybe 60. He was bald on top, but had graying hair wrapped around the lower half of his head that extended into a large beard that covered much of his face. Dark eyes were set on either side of a large nose and a pretty big pair of lips was situated underneath the man's impressively sized schnoz. "I am the ship's financial administrator. My name is Hitodii," the man introduced himself with a small bow of the head, an action that was reciprocated by Anko. "Well met. I'm Mitarashi Anko. With me are my genin squad, Uzumaki Naruto, Uzumaki Akane and Yuki Haku. We're here on behalf of Konoha, who you requested aid in protecting your ship and its cargo while en route to Mizu no Kuni." "That is correct, and I am pleased to see Konoha respond so quickly. As you might know, our relationship with Mizu no Kuno is very fragile right now, due in part to the Kaima's attacks on Mizu no Kuni ships. In order to try and foster good relations, and hopefully avoid any further complications, the decision was made to push our departure forward. It is very fortunate that you arrived when you did." "I see," Anko murmured thoughtfully. She took a few seconds to pause and think, before nodding her head. "Do not worry. Even with the change in timetables, our mission's parameters remain the same: protect your ship, its crew and cargo at all costs. Thank you for your cooperation." The man's relief was visible as he let out a deep gust of air. "There is one more thing I would like to inform you about. Anko looked curiously at the man. Yes. As you have no doubt seen for yourself, our nation is not a wealthy one. And recently our people, our fishermen especially, have become extremely nervous about this kaima. Once more, the man bowed before Anko. It was not quite Dejiza, but was definitely more respectful than what most people would give to a shinobi who was not a kage. Anything you can do about this monster would be greatly appreciated. Anko looked at the man for several moments, contemplating his request. Behind her, Naruto and Akane looked at each other, then over at Haku, who had been very silent since they had entered the building. Don't worry, Anko said at last. We'll do everything we can to eliminate this threat before your ship sets sail. Once more, the old financial administrator bowed low. We are very grateful to you. Story of the Ten-Tailed Wolf. After the meeting with the financial administrator was finished, the group of Konoha ninja made their way outside again. With the sun now bearing down on their heads from over high, signifying it was nearing midday, the two shinobi plus one Hanyu plus one immortal demigoddess Yukai walked along the road. It was while they were walking that the group made their plans for the coming days. They had 4 days before the ship left port, which was about a week ahead of schedule, but not something they were overly concerned with. Leaving early just meant spending less time in this small town. The real question was about what they should do in the meantime. Thankfully, they already had a task they needed to complete in the coming days set. All they needed to do was complete it. We should start digging up clues on possible whereabouts of the kaima by asking the locals, Anko was saying as they wove through the crowds of people. We may be able to discover some interesting information if we asked some of the local fishermen, since they're the ones the kaima rumors originated from. Sounds like a plan to me. Naruto grinned, placed his hands behind his head, fingers laced and being used to support his cranium as he leaned back slightly and looked up at the sky. Though, I'm not really one for digging around for rumors. Never liked sleuthing about. I'm more of a straight fighter kind of guy. Launch me at an enemy and watch me kick ass. That's what I like to do. Snooping around for clues is boring. Yeah, well, get used to it, Anko said, snorting at the boy. Digging up rumors and sifting through everything you've learned in order to find the truth is what being a shinobi is all about. We're experts on stealth, espionage and information gathering, though, a lot of people seem to have forgotten our roots these days. Most new ninja only see shinobi as people who can breath fireballs and control the elements. She shook her head in disappointment. Bunch of rank amateurs. You're a lot closer to the truth than you might expect, Anko. As the voice of the oldest among them spoke up, 2 sets of heads turned to look at Akane. You ninja didn't always have chakra, not until the Rikudo Sennin came along. Before that, ninja had to rely on their wits and their talents in stealth to get by. Back during that time, shinobi were in small supply, only the best of the best, the most elite, made anything of themselves. The rest were killed off because they weren't good enough. It was much tougher back then. I'll bet, Anko looked at the other woman curiously. You know, I keep forgetting that you're not just a normal shinobi and have been around for a long time. You probably have a lot of knowledge locked away inside that head of yours. I bet you've got a lot of stories to tell. I have many tales that I could weave. You could listen to me for years and never hear about half the things I've done and seen in my life. As Anko began conversing a bit more with the red head, Naruto turned to look at the last of their companions. Haku was staring off into space, a pensive expression on his face as he worried his lower lip. It made the boy look very, well, girly, but Naruto just assumed that was mostly due to his androgynous looks. Nudging the ice using ninja in the shoulder, the blonde-haired Ukami Hanyu broke the other boy's concentration and caused his head to pan over and look at him. You've been awfully quiet, Naruto observed. Got something on your mind? Haku shook his head. Not really. I was just thinking about something. Story of the Ten-Tailed Wolf. Having a plan of action and knowing what they needed to do did not make actually doing it any easier, especially when people seemed to be deliberately impeding their progress. The group of 4 had set off in search of any fisherman that may have some knowledge about the Kaima, the so-called demon of the sea. Unfortunately, none of the people they spoke to actually seemed to know much, if anything, about the creature itself. It seemed that none of them had ever seen this Kaima before. All they had were half-baked rumors and old legends that had been passed down for a while, nothing conclusive. At least, that was what they got from those who were willing to speak with them on the subject. Not everyone they spoke to was actually willing to answer their questions. A few of the people they ran into were even quite rude. Apparently, the locals did not like the idea of outsiders getting involved in their affairs. They had been pretty belligerent to the foursome even after the group had explained that they were shinobi hired to take care of the Kaima for them. You'd think these people would want their help, right? But no, they'd much rather suffer in silence and stupidity than let outsiders aid them in their time of need. Idiots. You came to do what? Of course, just because most people refused to answer their questions did not mean everyone they ran into was like that. There were some people who were willing to talk. One woman in particular, whose desire to see someone get rid of the Kaima overpowered her natural distrust of outsiders, was more than willing to share what she knew once they had informed her of their purpose. Very well, I'll tell you what I know. The woman crossed her arms under her bust, her expression somewhat pensive as she began to weave her story of woe. For as long as I've known, generations of fishermen have told the legend of Demon Island. This legend warns against even going near the place called the Island of Demons. She paused, her mind gathering all the information she had that she could present to the shinobi. From the beginning, the waters off Demon Island were always rich in fish, but the hidden reefs there made it too dangerous for boats. Most people heeded these legends and stayed away. But not you, right? Said Naruto, taking a guess at where she was going with her story. The woman looked at him, then nodded her head. It was about 10 years ago when it happened. During one unusually cool summer, all of the fish disappeared from the sea. We had no choice, so my husband and I ventured into the treacherous waters. We caught many fish, but when I returned to the surface with our haul, I was stunned to see the boat completely empty. My husband was nowhere to be seen. The woman closed her eyes, a look of longing crossing her face as she remembered the day she lost her husband. Glancing at each other, 3 of the 4 Konoha ninja could not help but feel compassion towards this woman. Only Akane did not give the simple fisherwoman a pitying look. She was far too inured to death, destruction and the killing of innocents due to all the things she had seen in her long life to be affected by a story like this. Opening her eyes once more, the woman continued where she left off. Since then, one by one, everyone who has dared to approach that island has disappeared. Even those who go to search for the people who went missing. Now no one goes to that island, for fear that they too will be taken away. The 3 shinobi plus 1 immortal Yukai looked at each other, all of them thinking the same thing. Haku turned back to look at the woman who had just given them a good deal of prime information. I heard something about a girl who had managed to return after being taken away, he said, causing the woman to flinch. Oh, yes, Isaribi. From the way she spoke, it was clear the woman did not like the young girl, or perhaps she was just wary of her. It all amounted to the same thing anyways. This woman was afraid of going near Isaribi due to her unfortunate circumstances. If it wouldn't be too much trouble, do you think you could tell me where Isaribi-san lives? Asked Haku. He gave the woman a very formal bow upon making his request. Naruto looked from Haku to Akane. Grinning slyly, he leaned over to his mate so he could whisper in her ear. I think someone's got a crush. Akane giggled quietly, but shushed him in favor of listening to the conversation between Haku and the woman. While seemingly wary of the girl, she was still willing to inform the ice user where the young female lived. Meanwhile, Anko was frowning as she stared at Demon Island, whose craggy peaks and desolate appearance could be seen in the distance. They spoke with the woman a bit more, asking for specifics on what she knew about the disappearances and her own experience at Demon Island. In turn, the woman told them where she had been diving when her husband disappeared. After learning everything they could, the 4 Konoha shinobi left. The group walked along the boardwalk, making their way back to the inn they were staying at. The beach and ocean was on their left. The sounds of the waves lapping at the shore and the seagulls soaring overhead accompanied their short journey. While they were walking, Enko told them all what their next plan of action was to be. We now know that whoever is kidnapping these people is likely based on Demon Island. We don't know that for sure, Akane corrected the woman. The one responsible for these kidnappings could just be taking people when they go to Demon Island to throw us off their trail. For all we know, they could be living right here on Mother Island and are simply using the legend of Demon Island to keep people from digging any deeper. True, Enko conceded. But this is the best lead we currently have. Akane had to concede to that, which she did so with a nod. So, I think our course of action is clear. We'll ask around a bit more to see if anyone else has a differing opinion to offer, then head over to Demon Island tomorrow morning. We have 4 days before the ship will be guarding set sail, so let's make this time count. Akane and Naruto were both in agreement with this course of action. Neither really had anything to add, and they honestly didn't care all that much. It wasn't like anything they were likely to face could kill them. There were very few humans that could stand up to Naruto, and Akane, even when weakened, was more than a match for any human currently living. Her experience made her one of the most formidable opponents in the entire elemental nations. Only Haku felt the need to disagree with Enko. Actually, Enko-sensei, I was hoping that I could visit Isaribasan. When the woman with the purple hair in the shape of a pineapple looked at him, Haku decided to explain himself by elaborating further. Isaribasan was apparently one of those who had been captured by the person responsible for the disappearances. Yet she somehow managed to escape, which means she likely knows who is behind this and what they hope to accomplish. I think it would be best if I went to speak with her. You sure you don't just want to talk to her so you can ask her out on a date? Naruto teased, causing the ice user to both scowl and blush at the same time. This is hardly a joking matter, Naruto-san, Haku tried to inform the blonde immortal with a firm gaze and unwavering expression. He failed due to his red face, but it was a good attempt. I only met her once and not for more than a minute. She didn't even speak to me. I saw something familiar in her eyes, and I was hoping to be able to speak with her about it. I may be able to help her. Naruto stared at the boy for a few long seconds, and then his face broke out into a vulpine-like grin. I still think you just want to cozy up to this Isaribi girl. Haku scowled, even as his cheeks began to burn something fierce. So this was how Enko felt whenever Akane and Naruto teased her. What an unpleasant feeling. He opened his mouth to say something, but Enko, not wanting an argument of any kind to erupt, spoke first. You can travel over to this Isaribi girl's place, she informed him. Thank you, Haku sighed in relief. It was so nice to see their team leader acting practical. It made for a nice change of pace, especially when compared to the 2 powerhouses of their squad. Just be sure to use a condom. Haku's face began overheating. It looked like he had spoken too soon. Story of the Ten-Tailed Wolf. The day was still young as Haku strolled down the beach. Above his head, the sun shone down, sending bright, warm rays of luminescence upon the land and sea, causing the ocean to sparkle as the tide lapped at the shore. The young ice-using ninja took this moment to enjoy the relative peace, knowing that this peace would shatter as soon as he linked back up with the other members of his team. Seriously, even if they didn't run into trouble, an unlikely occurrence given what had happened so far, and the rest of their mission proceeded smoothly, fat chance of that happening, the amount of chaos Akane and Naruto caused on a near-daily basis was more than enough to make any kind of lasting peace seem like the pipe dreams of a foolish child. Those two were just that problematic. On the other side of the beach that Haku was walking upon were a large series of cliffs that blocked off this small section of the ocean from the rest of the island. It made the area feel very isolated. Haku suspected that Isaribi had chosen this place as her home for that very reason. It wasn't long before he reached his destination, a small hut built from wood and what appeared to be parts of a ship's hull. Running along the entire length of the front wall was graffiti. Haku read the kanji that had been painted on the wall, likely by some of the villagers with narrowed eyes. He did not like any of the words written on there. The lights inside of the hut were on. Through the small window panes in the doorway, Haku could make out the silhouette of a female figure that he recognized as belonging to Isaribi. After staring at the black outline for several seconds, Haku took a deep breath, squared his shoulders and walked up to the door. He stopped just in front of the door, wondering how he should proceed. Isaribi had not seen him yet, it seemed, as she was still going about her business. From the smell of fish and broth and the fact that smoke was coming out of the tiny makeshift chimney on the roof, he could only assume she was cooking. That still left him with a dilemma. Should he just knock on the door, greet the girl and hope for the best? Or maybe he should observe her more and speak with her as she was exiting her house. That last one seemed kind of rude, though, and it made him feel like some kind of stalker. He didn't want to be a stalker, so it looked like knocking on the door and hoping for the best was the order of the day. He just hoped she didn't react to his presence like she had last time. Story of the Ten-Tailed Wolf, Achoo. Hinata rubbed her nose after her rather loud sneeze. Frowning, she wondered if she was coming down with something, but decided that it was not important. It didn't matter if she got sick. All that mattered was getting enough strength to accomplish her goal. She and her team had been out here on the training ground for nearly 3 hours now. Hinata would have come out here to train sooner, but she had been needed for her team to do missions in the morning. They had done everything from walking the Inuzuka dogs and painting a fence to pulling out weeds and shopping for a person's groceries. Not exactly the type of glamorous jobs you'd expect a shinobi to be doing. Just as Hinata was about to get back to her training, both of her teammates and her sensei walked over to her. "Are you okay, Hinata?" Kurenai asked in a kind of voice. That voice used to give Hinata comfort, but lately, for some reason, all it served to do was agitate the young genin. The blue-haired girl could not help but feel like her sensei was coddling her because the raven-haired beauty thought she was weak. "I'm fine," Hinata replied, keeping her voice as polite as ever. "I think I just had something in my nose." "So long as you're alright," Kurenai smiled. "Anyways, I think we're going to stop here for the day. You've all been working pretty hard, and I bet you're tired." "I know I am," Kiba said, boisterous as ever. "All I want to do now is go home and sleep." "You're tired too, right, Akamaru?" "Bark. I must admit to feeling rather exhausted myself." Shino's shades flashed in the light of the dying sun. "Why?" "Because we worked very hard today. Our training was an arduous affair." He looked over at the youngest female of their group. "Of course, none of us worked quite as hard as you have lately." "Shino's right," Kiba added, with Akamaru barking out his own 2 cents. "You've been training really hard lately. I don't think I've ever seen anyone put as much effort into their training as you have." "I agree with the boys on this." Kurenai gave the younger girl a proud smile. "You've been working very hard lately, and have improved by leaps and bounds. You should feel proud of yourself." Hinata, being the polite girl that she is, bowed gratefully to the 3. "Thank you, Shiniken. Kiba-kun, Kurenai-sensei." As she rose from her bow, she looked at her raven-haired, reedy teacher. "If it is all right with you, Kurenai-sensei, I think I am going to stay out and train for a little while longer." Kurenai bit her lip in concern. "I am not so sure that's a good idea. You could get hurt when you train, and if I am not there to supervise you." "I will be fine, Kurenai-sensei," Hinata told the woman firmly, or as firmly as Hinata could. Her sensei looked at her for a moment longer and, seeing the strange fire in her pupil's eyes, sighed in defeat. "I suppose this is something I can't talk you out of." "Very well, you can continue training." Kurenai sent the young genin with blue hair and lavender eyes a stern look that was laced with concern. But try not to overdo it, okay? While it's important to train in order to get stronger, it is just as important to make sure your body receives a proper amount of rest. Yes, Kurenai sensei. Hinata's teammates and sensei soon made their exit, leaving the young Hyuga genin alone in the training ground. Said lavender-eyed female watched them leave, waiting until they had disappeared into the line of trees to turn back to her opponent. Said opponent was one of 3 training dummies, large logs embedded into the ground and wrapped up in rope, that was situated in the center of the training ground. Hinata glared fiercely at this training dummy, her mind conjuring up an image of a beautiful girl with red hair and red eyes, and supplanting this image over that of the dummies. Tell her that she should give up on the one good thing that ever happened to her, would she? The bitch. Hinata was going to show her. Breathing deeply, Hinata lowered her body into the wide stance favored by members of the Hyuga clan. Her chakra burst forth, causing her eyes to show several of the veins running beneath them. Several more veins appeared on either side of her temple, throbbing as chakra flowed through them. These veins, combined with her fierce and potent glare, made the girl look almost frightening. She probably would look frightening, if she wasn't such a cute little thing. For a moment, all was still, all was silent. Not a sound was made, not from the animals, not even from the trees being rustled in a breeze. It was quiet, almost eerily so. Hiya. This silence was broken as Hinata launched herself at the training dummy. Her open-palmed hands lashed out, catching the log in the middle and causing several loud bangs, like the clapping of thunder to resound through the training ground with each strike. And with each strike the log itself rattled as she used chakra to enhance her speed and strength beyond what any normal person could accomplish. Hinata did not know how long she stayed in that training ground, striking out at that dummy as she pretended it was a kane, but it must have been hours. By the time she had finally decided to call it quits, the sun was starting to set. Getting out of her stance, the young, Hyuga genin looked at the training dummy in satisfaction, noting the damage she had done to the exterior. That was quite impressive, a voice spoke up behind her. Eyes widening, Hinata spun around, sweat flying off her body. As she finished about facing, the Hyuga heiress was able to see the person who had spoken, an old man wrapped in bandages. He was wearing a white kimono that covered much of his body. Only his face was visible, and even then, she was only about to see about half his face because the rest was covered in more bandages. What's more, his left arm was wrapped in a sling, adding to his war victim appearance. In his right hand was a long walking cane. Denzusen, Hinata greeted the man warily. Her father was on the shinobi council, so she knew who this man was. Both she and her sister had always been told to be wary of Danzu, and that he was not to be trusted. Can I help you with something? I believe that is not the question you should be asking, Danzu said as he walked forward, his cane tapping lightly against the ground. Hinata's body coiled like a spring as he approached her, but he seemed to not notice. Or he was ignoring her tense posture. I was watching you practice. Danzu eyed the log as he came up alongside of her, which had several dents in it from where her palms had struck. He was watching her practice. Hinata tried not to shudder at the creepy compliment. I've noticed that your form is excellent, however, you seem to be having some trouble with the standard Juken forms. Hinata frowned at the true comment, but did not say anything. Mainly because she did not know what to say. Your body is much too flexible for the rigid stance required for Juken. Hinata flinched at the comment on her greatest flaw, but Danzu continued ignoring her very obvious physical tells. However, where your elders might feel that your inability to truly conform to their rigid style is a weakness, I only see a strength. What do you mean? Asked Hinata. Despite knowing how dangerous this man was thanks to her father, she could not help but want to hear what he had to say about her. He said he saw strength in her form. How could that be? The Hyuga are some of the greatest taijutsu practitioners in the elemental nations, this is true, but their rigid structure and inability to adapt is their greatest weakness and will likely be their downfall if it is not corrected. Danzu finally turned to face her, his single eye boring into her. Lavender Ones. I believe that you can change this, make the Hyuga clan strong again by bringing something new to your clan. With my help, of course. Why your help? Hinata blinked. Why would you want to help me? She looked down, her hair overshadowing her eyes. I'm not very strong. She wasn't even strong enough to keep the boy she loved away from the arms of another. That is where you are wrong. Hinata looked up. You simply do not know how to apply your strength yet, but with my help, you will finally be able to achieve your true potential. Hinata worried her lower lip for a moment, her mind silently contemplating all she was being told. If she was understanding him right, Danzu was offering her aid with her training. However, if I were to accept your help, what would you want in return? Merely that you bring strength back to your clan. Despite his seemingly honest and patriotic answer, Hinata was still hesitant to accept his aid. It was then, after several seconds, that Danzu finally spoke the words that would change the lives of Hinata and many others in Konoha, for better or worse. If you accept my aid, you will become strong enough to even beat Akane and win back Uzumaki Naruto. Any decision that Hinata may have made evaporated like ice when it's thrown into a raging fire. Now there was only one choice left to her. I'll accept your help. She would become strong. Stronger than anyone could imagine. And then, when she was strong enough, she would show Akane that she was the one who deserved to be by Naruto's side. Oh yes. She would show her. Then come. Danzu did not show any emotions. It was not his way to show his emotions. But if he could, there would have been a victorious smile on his face. Let us begin your training. Story of the Ten-Tailed Wolf, are you sure letting Haku go off on his own was a good idea? Asked Naruto. The duo of Konoha ninja plus one all-powerful entity beyond mortal comprehension had spent the rest of the day asking around for clues and confirmations about the disappearances that happened around Demon Island after Haku departed from their company. They had spent several hours speaking with various store owners and fishermen, hoping to gather what little information they could to support or deny what they had already learned. A few of the people had been a bit more receptive to their questions once they learned that the three were already aware of the disappearances and what had been going down on the mysterious Demon Island. For example, they had been able to confirm beyond a shadow of a doubt that the disappearances did happen on or around Demon Island, and that anyone who went there also ended up disappearing. They also learned that the last disappearance was around 2 months ago, just a few weeks before Isaribi had made her miraculous reappearance. Enko sat down on the edge of the bed, bouncing several times as the springs in the mattress tried to accommodate. For the added weight. I don't see why not, the purple-haired Jonin answered with a shrug. Ice Boy might not be as powerful as you two or even myself, but he's still pretty good. I would place his skills around Chunin in level. He'll be fine. That's not really what I meant, Naruto sighed. I'm sure there are very few people around here that would be able to beat him in a straight-up fight. But by splitting us up, we weaken our own forces, and while I am confident that Akane and I can handle anything that comes our way, I don't want to release any more power than I have to. It wouldn't do if we were backed into a corner and myself or Akane were forced to use more power than we intended. The last thing we need to have happen is for one of us to destroy Demon Island with one of our attacks. Like I said, don't worry too much about, wait. Enko blinked, then turned to look at Naruto. Did you just say, accidentally destroy Demon Island? Yes. I thought so. Enko nodded to herself. She then looked at the pair as they snuggled together underneath their joined futon. Can you really destroy an island? Akane, I can picture it, but you? You're pretty powerful, I'll admit, but destroying an island would take some serious firepower. I could destroy that island easily, Akane informed Enko. She then added, and Naruto currently has more power than I do. He would be able to destroy that island 10 times over if he released all of his power at once. Ah, so I see. Anko was not sure how she should feel about the fact that two of her genin had the capacity to destroy an entire island. Glad that they were on her side? Or jealous because one of those powerhouses was at least 10 years younger than she was? Story of the Ten-Tailed Wolf. 2 days later, Guren frowned as she looked over the hideous creations of the mad doctor who worked on Demon Island. These things, for she could not consider them anything other than a thing, were all disgusting, ugly and brutish-looking creatures. There was no elegance to them, just a mindless brutality that sickened her to see. She did not care for ugly things. A person as beautiful as herself had no use for the ugly. It didn't help their case that aside from being the most putrid wastes of rotting flesh and scales that she had ever seen, they were also mindless and stupid. The monsters didn't seem to possess any form of sentience other than their baser instincts. They attacked anything at will, even each other. "So, what do you think of my creations?" asked Amachi. He at least looked very pleased with his monstrous-looking creatures. The man was eyeing them with barely masked glee. "The only possible use these things have is to serve as cannon fodder," Guren declared without a care in the world. There was no subtlety in her voice as she blatantly declared Amachi's experiments all but worthless. Amachi twitched, but quickly reined in his emotions. "I'll admit, they could use some work. Despite this, I do feel these creatures are a success. They may not have a very high level of intelligence, but they are incredibly strong, can breathe underwater indefinitely, and have the unique ability to manipulate water in a way that is similar to Suetun ninjutsu. These creatures would be more than a match for any army in a seafaring battle." "You mean if they don't kill each other first," said Guren, watching in disgust as one of the monsters ripped the head of another one off in a splatter of gore. As blood stained the already soaking floor in even more carnelian fluids, she turned away in disgust. "The only thing these things are good for is being a meat shield, maybe not even that, since they're so stupid and mindless. These beasts would probably be too busy fighting each other to even notice when an enemy is right in front of them." As Amachi began shaking in rage at the perceived insult, alarms began blaring inside of the laboratory. "What is that noise?" "It's the intruder alert." Amachi quickly ran over to one of the monitors in the back of the room and typed several commands into the console. The screen flickered from the pure blue of standby mode to the image shown from the external camera near the front gate. "It seems we have intruders." Guren came up behind the doctor and looked at the screen over his shoulder. Smirking as she saw an image of two people appearing on screen, she said, well, it looks like my master's old toy has finally decided to show up, and she brought one of her genin along with her, though, this one is different from that ice user." For a moment, she wondered where the ice user was, but quickly decided it wasn't worth thinking about. This was probably just a scouting party anyways. "You know something." Guren's smirk grew as the two on the screen stared at the large doors in front of them. "I think I may have just found a use for those ugly creatures, after all." "What do you want?" Those were the first words to leave Isaribi's mouth upon opening the door to her little hut. Haku froze for a moment when her agitated eyes met his. It wasn't that he was afraid of that look so much as he was clueless of how to deal with it. "Well?" Isaribi prompted when Haku remained silent. Haku grasped at straws for something to say. He'd come here hoping to somehow alleviate this person's pain, but now that he was here, he had no idea what to say. How are you, doing?" He winced. "Great job, Haku. You're a real smooth operator. I'm sure she feels so comfortable now." Isaribi's expression was so flat that paper looked three-dimensional. "I'm doing fine." "Now, what do you want?" she asked again. Haku's shoulders slumped. "I wanted to see how you were doing," he admitted in a low voice. "After what happened back there at the market, I grew really worried because I'd heard that a lot of people have been cruel to you. So I wanted to see if you were okay." You wanted to see if I was okay? Yes. You wanted to see if I was okay? Isaribi repeated. Yes. Haku became increasingly nervous the longer Isaribi stared at him. Her eyes weren't necessarily cold, but they did appear to be rather chilly. The lack of emotion in them bothered him, too, though the chill in her eyes went rather well with her deadpan expression. As you can see, I am perfectly fine, Isaribi said, and her voice was colder than Haku's ice jutsu. Now, do me a favor and leave me alone. Haku felt a moment of panic when he saw Isaribi start to close on the door on his face. It was that panic that caused him to act hastily, putting his hand in the door just as it slammed closed. Hold on a minute. I just want to YEOWCH. Isaribi jerked the door open at his yell. Haku jerked his hand back, withholding tears as pain throbbed through it. He'd been hurt far worse than this, but without adrenaline pumping through him to block out the pain, having his hand smashed by a door really hurt. Are you okay? Isaribi asked almost timidly. Her voice was very different from how it had been a second ago. I think so. Haku grimaced as he studied his hand. It was red, swollen, and would need to be iced, but at least it was his left hand and not his right. He could still use one-handed seals. Here. Isaribi grabbed him by the arm and dragged him into her hut. There's no need to concern yourself with. Haku started, only to be shot down. Be quiet. Yes, ma'am. Isaribi led him to the center of her home. It was a tiny place. Even though he'd suspected as much from seeing the outside, he couldn't get over how small this hut really was. It couldn't have been more than 10 square meters. The roof was also much lower than he'd imagined. There was enough room for him and Isaribi to stand up, but someone like Zabuza or Kakashi would have had to hunch down. The hut was just a single room with a bed on one end and a grill in the center. There was no flooring, just the sand from the beach, though Isaribi had built the grill at a lower level. She must have dug out that part of the sand, then filled it with a small layer of cement to keep its square shape. Several large fish nets that were generally used by fishermen hung from the walls like decorations. Haku wondered if that was Isaribi's way of making this ramshackle hut a little more comfortable. Sit down, Isaribi told him. Not knowing what else to do, Haku did as she instructed. He sat near the small grill, which currently had a pot over it and was being used to cook soup. It was a primitive method of cooking, but she didn't seem to have any amenities. The scent of Isaribi's cooking hit him, and shifted as his stomach chose that moment to growl. The soup smelled good. He could tell that she had used a mixture of salt water and various types of seafood in it. There were probably at least 3 different types of fish mixing inside to create that delectable smell. Now's not the time to get hungry. He watched Isaribi walk over to a small drawer. He couldn't see what she had pulled out of it until she turned around, revealing the item to be a basic first aid kit. She then walked back over to him and knelt down. Ah, Haku uttered when Isaribi grabbed his hand. There's no need for you to. Look, could you just be quiet, please, Isaribi demanded. Since I did this to you, it's only right that I fix this. What an admirable girl. Haku had known when he first saw her that she had a good heart. He'd always been good at looking underneath the facades that people had put in place, the shields they placed around themselves to fool others. That's why he trusted Naruto and Akane implicitly. He knew who they were, even if they didn't say anything. Just like them, this girl was a good person who'd built up a wall of steel. Thank you, Haku said, smiling. But what I meant was that there's no need for that. Before Isaribi could question him, Haku pulled back his hand. Making a hand seal with his right hand, he took a deep breath, then blew frost from his mouth, which quickly covered his hand, numbing it. Isaribi gaped. Wah. Wah. How? It's a special talent of mine, Haku informed her. In the land where I'm from, there are people who have Kekkei Genkai, bloodline traits that allow them to use abilities unique to their bloodline. Mine is the ability to control ice. Oh. Isaribi didn't seem to know what to say. She fell onto her backside, staring at him with unblinking eyes. Cool. Haku smiled. It isn't as cool as it sounds. Where I come from, people with bloodline traits like my own are hated and feared. My mother, who was also a bloodline carrier, hid amongst a small village and got married. Yet not even she could escape from the hatred. When I went to show my mother the power that I had manifested, my father saw it. He gathered the other villagers, killed my mom, and tried to kill me, too. I only survived because my Kekkei Genkai protected me. Isaribi was staring at him in shock. Her eyes, wider than should have been possible, were like pools that gave him a murky glimpse into her soul. I heard about what happened to you, Haku continued. I understand that these people haven't been the best because you were abducted and returned when no one else did, and I guess. Well, what I mean is that, because I understand, I wanted you to know that you're not alone. Or something. Haku could have cursed himself. That ending was bad, but he wasn't like Naruto, who could pull random speeches from his ass and make them sound good through sheer charisma. Maybe I should take a page from Naruto's book. Isaribi looked away, biting her lip. Haku wondered if he should say something, but he didn't know what to say. Finally, Isaribi spoke. When I was really young, a man named Amachi kidnapped me and several other children. He experimented on us. I remember how Amachi would inject drugs and serums into us, and how he would cut us open and change our insides. He always kept us awake and aware. He said it was to help him know if something was wrong. I don't know about any of that. I just know that it hurt. Haku remained silent as he listened to Isaribi's story. He didn't know what was sadder, her story, or the fact that her story wasn't unique. While her tale was indeed sad, it didn't change how many children all over the elemental nations had probably been subject to the same thing. According to Anko, the base in this area had been one of Orochimaru's old facilities. That man was infamous for kidnapping and experimenting on children, among other things. Is that why you're covered in bandages? Haku asked. Isaribi nodded. Right now, the people who know about me only know that I returned after being spirited away. They're afraid of me, but they don't do anything really bad to me. But, if they knew that I was no longer human. When Isaribi trailed off, Haku placed his arms behind his back and leaned on them. He understood what she was saying. Those bandages likely covered deformities or something that were left over from the experiments. If people saw them, they would surely think ill of her, and they might even take action against her. It wouldn't have surprised Haku if they decided to try and kill her out of fear. However, there was one thing that was bothering him. The person who's been attacking ships is you, isn't it? It was only a guess, but when he saw Isaribi flinch, Haku knew that he'd hit the nail on the head. Is it because of that Amachi guy? Is he making you do this? Isaribi remained silent. Haku shifted uncomfortably as he realized that he might have just entered a sensitive topic, one that she wasn't willing to talk about. However, after several more seconds of silence, Isaribi finally said, he is. He. Amachi, that is, said that if I did what he asked of me, then he would turn me into a human again. Haku felt something churn inside of his stomach. It felt similar to guilt, and for a moment, he wondered why he felt this way. Only after analyzing his own feelings did he realize why he felt like this. It was because he wanted to demolish her illusions, even though he knew it would cause her pain. You do realize that the chances of Amachi actually turning you back to the way you are slim, right? What? Isaribi seemed shocked. She stood up suddenly, startling Haku, and stared down at him with horrified eyes. I mean, this Amachi guy is the one who experimented on you, right? It just doesn't sound plausible for him to no. Isaribi shouted. No, no, no. Stop talking. I don't want to hear this. He will turn me back. He promised. Isaribi. Haku stood up. Isaribi took a step back. Just because someone made a promise to you doesn't mean they'll keep it. This Amachi doesn't sound like a very good person. He might even be lying to you, promising to turn you back in order to make you do his bidding. Shut up. Just shut up. Isaribi screamed, backing away until her back pressed against the door. Tears leaked from her eyes as she glared at him. You told me you understand how I feel, so I thought you'd be different, but you're just like everybody else. Isaribi, I don't want to hey. Haku shouted when Isaribi ran out of the hut. Isaribi. Wait. He followed her, rushing outside. However, even though this girl wasn't a shinobi, her body had clearly been enhanced beyond that of a mere human. He couldn't catch her before she leapt into the ocean, diving in head first and disappearing from sight. Haku could have followed her, and he might have even been able to catch up, but something held him back. It was guilt. Looking at the setting sun, Haku sighed to himself. Smooth, Haku. That was real smooth. Way to make a girl feel good about herself. Feeling more defeated than ever, Haku left the beach and headed back to the inn that he and his companions were staying at. Haku looked despondent when he returned to the inn. Naruto watched the boy dejectedly stumble into the room, his face one of abject defeat. Considering what Haku had been going to do before leaving them, Naruto had a pretty good guess as to why he was so depressed. It looks like you just got dumped, Naruto said bluntly. Let me guess, you tried to be understanding and compassionate, then you said something that Isaribi didn't like and she ran away from you. Haku sighed as he walked listlessly to the bed, then sat down, his posture slumping even further. Slowly, he nodded. It's exactly as you say. Heh, Akane said. That sounds like one troublesome girl. The four of them were arranged around the room. Naruto sat against a wall, absent-mindedly going through the 12 standard hand seals. His mate, Akane, stood next to him, leaning against the wall with her arms crossed. He took a moment to admire the way her crossed arms pushed her bosoms together. While Haku sat on the bed, Enko used the windowsill as her seat. She was gazing out at Demon Island, which they could see on the horizon. I wonder what she's thinking, Naruto thought. Naruto looked up at Akane, who returned his gaze. Their eyes met and, as one, matching grins spread across their faces. Standing up, Naruto walked beside Akane, moving stealthily behind Enko, who hadn't noticed them. Haku looked like he wanted to say something, but they pinned him with a gaze that made him snap his mouth shut. Turning back to their teacher, they both mentally counted down to 3. And then they pounced. Kia! Enko's squeal echoed around the room as Akane and Naruto each grabbed a breast. Oh, my, Mistress-chan. Such a distracted state of mind is unbecoming of a shinobi, Akane teased as she shamelessly fondled Enko. Naruto nodded in agreement. His hand was also full of Enko's breast, which he noticed was smaller than Akane's by at least 1 cup. Had we been enemies, you would have just been killed. Really, you should pay more attention to your surroundings. Whatever, Enko moaned and squirmed against them. Just let me go. I don't know if we should, Naruto started as he kept his palm firmly over her breast. I mean, if we let you go just like that, you wouldn't learn your lesson. Akane, apparently agreeing, added, not to mention, you have a very nice rack. What size is this? 89 centimeters. That's impressive for a human. Don't compliment my boobs while you're groping me. Let go. Naruto and Akane eventually did let go of Enko, allowing her to turn around and glare at the two. They were unrepentant, however, and her vitriol only seemed to make them more pleased with themselves. Now that we have your attention, Enko-sensei, maybe you could tell us what's got you so worried, Naruto said as he sat back down. It's nothing, Enko groused moodily. She didn't appear pleased. Naruto wondered if it was because of the groping, but then he dismissed the thought. He and Akane were confident in their groping technique. It's clearly not nothing, Akane shot back. You've been spacing out ever since we arrived here. As our leader, you're the one who makes all of the decisions. If you space out during a critical moment, then it could lead to the failure of our mission. Anko sighed again as she seemed to finally realize that neither of them would let this go. How much do you know of my history? Naruto and Akane shared a glance. They turned back to Anko and, shrugging, Naruto said, not much. We know that you were once apprenticed to Orochimaru, but we never dug too deeply into your past. Rubbing her left arm, Anko looked out the window again. When I was still Orochimaru's apprentice, we came to this place. I don't remember what happened, but Hokage-sama said that he found me inside of a sealed cave. According to him and the ANBU who interrogated me, Orochimaru had abandoned me here, though we don't know anything else. What do you think? Naruto asked Akane through their mental link. I think Anko is having more problems than we realized, Akane replied. Out loud, she asked, have you been experiencing nightmares recently? Anko gawked at her. How did you know? I'm a several thousand-year-old demigoddess. How could I not know? Anko's expression turned sheepish. Akane continued. I've studied humans for a long time, so I understand how the human mind works. When a person experiences a traumatic situation, their mind does one of two things: it blocks the memory to keep their mental state stable, or it degrades and the person becomes insane. Of course, there is the third possibility where the person confronts their past and overcomes it, but that usually doesn't happen right away. As a powerful entity who's been alive since before the time of ninja, Akane had a lot of experience under her belt. While experience didn't necessarily equate to wisdom, Naruto knew that his mate had gained wisdom by going through life. She was easily the most intelligent and knowledgeable person that he knew, even more so than the Hokage. So, what does that have to do with me? Are you saying I've been traumatized to forget about what happened? Anko asked. Yes, Akane said bluntly. The fact that you can't remember what happened here proves that your mind, stressed over what happened here, locked the memory deep within your subconscious. However, now that you've come here, to the place where Orochimaru supposedly abandoned you, those memories are beginning to resurface. Anko remained silent. Naruto, realizing that she wasn't going to speak, said, since your memories are coming back, maybe it's time you confronted what happened here and overcome it. You'll probably need to do that anyway, since it looks like those memories are hindering you. I guess. This is all really interesting, Haku interrupted, but don't you think we should come up with a plan to deal with this Kaima issue? That's right, Anko said, shaking her head as if to dispel her foreboding thoughts. We still need to come up with a plan. Haku, how did your visit with Isaribi go? Not so good, Haku admitted with a sigh before launching into an explanation of what had happened. Naruto and the others listened to him as he explained what he'd learned. By the end of it, he and Akane were nodding. That does sound like a troublesome situation, Naruto admitted before turning to Anko. What do you think we should do? I don't think Isaribi is really the problem here, Anko started, even if she is this Kaima that everyone is talking. It sounds to me like the problem is this Amachi character. I agree. Akane said. Speaking of, do you know if Amachi was here during your time with Orochimaru? Anko frowned. I don't know. He might. Maybe. When Anko's expression turned into a pained grimace, Naruto became worried. She placed a hand on her forehead, as if to stimulate a headache. Are you experiencing another memory? Naruto asked. I. Anko gritted her teeth as she struggled to speak. She must have been experiencing a lot of mental stress, because seconds later her eyes rolled up into the back of her head and she passed out. She would have fallen to the floor, but Akane caught her before that could happen, scooping the woman into her arms and carrying her to the bed, which Haku quickly vacated. "Is she going to be okay?" asked Haku. "She'll be fine," Akane assured him. "Enko's pretty strong. I'm sure she'll overcome this." "But will she overcome it in time to accomplish this mission?" Naruto wondered out loud. "We need to have faith in her." Akane turned to them and smiled. "If we don't have faith in others, then we're lost." Kukuku. The laughter reached her ears before the light did. She was lying face down on the floor. The scent of dirt filled her nose, and its taste lingered on her tongue. Loud creaking, the sound of steel groaning on unoiled hinges, attracted her attention as light spilled into the room, causing her to look up. A form was silhouetted by the light. She could barely make out anything, but as the figure walked closer, she was able to make him out. Orochimaru. Sama. Kukuku. "Little Ankakan, it looks like you're a failure after all. And I had such high hopes for you. What a shame." He walked further into the room and knelt down in front of her. "Still, the fact that you are alive shows that you might still prove useful." He held out his hand. "Come with me, Ankakan, and I'll make sure that you become an even more powerful shinobi than you are now." Anko stared at the hand, unsure of what to do. A choice had been presented to her. She could take the hand, and Orochimaru would probably do what he said, or she could not take the hand, but then he would likely abandon her. A choice. A decision. Which one should she make? As she thought about what to do, darkness enveloped her once again. Anko woke up with a startled gasp. Sitting up in bed, the room's darkness enveloped her. She could see very little beyond vague outlines. Cool air caressed her sweaty skin, making her shiver. Her eyes eventually adjusted the longer she sat there, allowing her to see more than simple silhouettes. She was alone on the bed, which surprised her, since Naruto and Akane had a bad habit of slipping into her bed as a prank. Glancing around, she quickly spotted the pair in question. They were resting against the wall. Akane lay between Naruto's legs. There was a blanket thrown over them, so she couldn't see much, but the evidence suggested that he was holding her. For a moment, Anko felt envious of Akane. She'd tried dating people before, but the only people that she attracted were the ones who thought she was a quick lay. Most people couldn't see past her infamy. Dispelling those thoughts, Anko looked down at the floor to see Haku sleeping in a roll-out futon. She could only see his head, which was uncovered by a blanket and resting on the pillow. He looks even more like a girl when he's sleeping, Anko thought with an amused chuckle. Laying back down, Anko closed her eyes and tried to go back to sleep, but sleep, it seemed, was elusive that night, and so she laid awake for several hours. The moon shone brightly through the window that night. The next 3 days that passed were uneventful. Naruto and Akane did some scouting and determined that there was a demonic presence on Demon Island. They weren't sure what type of demon was there, as the presence felt diluted, but there was definitely something on that island. Haku had spent these last 3 days going to Isaribi's little cottage. Each time he left, he would come back depressed less than an hour later. According to him, Isaribi was never there, and it was likely that she'd not returned home since running out on him. Naruto suspected that she was on Demon Island. Being the squad leader, Anko had determined their course of action. With Isaribi likely with the enemy, they had decided to wait until the last day to do anything. Anko, Akane, and Haku would escort the ship and its cargo. Meanwhile, Naruto would launch an all-out assault on Demon Island. It was a simple plan, but he preferred simple. Since they weren't doing much of anything, Anko had told them that they were off-duty until further notice. Naruto and Akane had used that time to explore the city. There wasn't much to offer there, so most of that time was spent playing small pranks on the villagers. Naruto had a blast adding itching powder to people's clothing, or swapping ingredients between restaurants. Their biggest prank had been switching all of the clothes from the lingerie store with clothing from a store for men. Since then, rumors of a vengeful spirit had started circulating amongst the people. A few idiots even thought Isaribi was responsible. Those people had been given especially harsh pranks. The evening sun painted the sky with a combination of reds and yellows. This wasn't the land of fire, so the sunset didn't have the glorious spread of fire across the sky, but it was pretty enough. Although Naruto wasn't really interested in admiring it at the moment. "Oi! Old man, gimme another bowl." "Another bowl? You really are a healthy eater, aren't you?" the old man asked, stuttering as he eyed the large stack of empty bowls on the table. There were at least 50. Naruto's laughter was boisterous and loud. "You bet I am. Now give me another bowl." "I'm afraid I don't have another bowl to give," the man said. "You ate all of my ingredients." "What?" Naruto looked shocked. "But I'm still hungry. I can't make food if I don't have any ingredients." "Come along, Naruto," Akane said, tugging at his arm, her beguiling face containing the utmost amusement. "Let's head out and see if there's anything else that we can do to kill time." Sighing as he realized that he was unlikely to get any more food, Naruto allowed Akane to grab his arm and lead him out of the small stand. As they walked along the uncrowded street, he felt a frown crossing his face. "This place really isn't doing too well," he said. "Small stands like that are supposed to have enough ingredients to last at least several days. What I ate wasn't enough to fill even 100 customers' bellies." "Or one incredibly ravenous customer," Akane added with the hint of a grin. "Or one really big eater," Naruto agreed. The fact that he was sold out after 50 bowls is actually pretty telling. "He could have gone shopping several days ago and is just now running out," Akane pointed out. "No." Naruto shook his head. "Stands like that have to buy their ingredients fresh every day. This is not only to keep themselves stocked, but it's also because the ingredients they use, minus the flour and a few others, spoil easily. The owner had gone shopping this morning, so there should have still been plenty for me to eat." The most likely cause for that man's food shortage was the lack of imports coming in. Since this village was rather out of the way, they relied on supplies coming from the sea and not by land. While he and Akane had been pranking several villagers, they'd noticed a distinct lack of supplies from many of them, especially the shops. Fish, in particular, seemed to be in scarce supply. "Tomorrow is the last day. I'll be glad when this mission is finally over," Akane said, stretching her arms above her head. Several men stopped what they were doing when her bust strained against her outfit. One even walked into a wall. Naruto ignored them and nodded. "Yeah, then we can go home. I never thought I'd miss Konoha so much." "That tends to happen when you're in a dump like this," Akane agreed. "That's right," Naruto thought, looking at the setting sun. "Tomorrow, our mission comes to an end." That evening, the sky was dyed red. Isaribi trailed after Gurren as the woman walked down the dark corridor. After running away from Haku, she'd fled to the base on Demon Island, where Amachi had told her that she was going to be working with Gurren on another job. He'd promised her that this would be her last job, then he would change her back. "You do realize that the chances of Amachi actually turning you back to the way you are is slim, right?" Isaribi clenched her hands into fists as Haku's voice played out in her head. He was wrong. He had to be. Amachi would change her back. He would make her normal again. She had to believe that, because if she didn't, then she would have nothing left. There would be no reason for her to go on living anymore. "You know what your job is, right?" Gurren asked. Isaribi looked up to see the woman staring at her with a single eye. Looking back down, she nodded once. "I'm going to keep the ice user busy," she said. "That's right. I'm glad to see that you can pay attention. We'll also be using those failed experiments of Amachi's to sow some chaos." Isaribi grimaced at the mention of the failed experiments. She didn't know much about them, other than that they had once been human. In truth, she didn't want to think about them. You'd better get some rest, girlie, Gurren continued, grinning. Tomorrow's gonna be a big day. Yes, tomorrow would be a big day. It was the day that her suffering would come to an end. The next day everyone woke up early, got dressed, ate, and left the hotel. It was the last time they would be there, so Enko returned the keys to the front before they left. Naruto parted ways with them when they were halfway to the docks. He would be launching an attack on Demon Island while Akane, Enko, and Haku used the shipment as bait for Isaribi. Since the girl was apparently innocent and merely being used by this character who called himself Amachi, and because Haku was soft on her, they decided to save her from her own stupidity. Personally, Akane didn't care one way or the other. She wasn't some saint who rescued every human just because they were innocent. But, Akane also wouldn't decry the girl for being dumb enough to believe the words of the person who turned her into what she was. Humans did strange things when they were desperate. She'd seen it thousands of times before, and she had learned about the measures that humanity would go in such situations. The ship that she and the others were escorting was not a large vessel. Standard in size, Akane judged the ship to be about 30 meters long. It was a worn-out ship. The floorboards creaked as it swayed and rocked, shifts caused by the ocean current. She stood near the bow of the ship. Gazing upon the event horizon, Akane only had one thought on her mind. I'm bored. It wasn't something new. Throughout the centuries, Akane had experienced different levels of boredom. Sometimes she would only be mildly bored, in which case she'd play harmless pranks on people that she met. Other times she'd become bored enough to stir up massive trouble. One time she'd even seduced 2 emperors and made them fight over her. That had been fun, at least for a while, but even that became boring eventually. I wonder if my relationship with Naruto will eventually grow stale. Akane's one constant worry, the only thing she ever worried about, was her relationship with the boy she'd taken a shine to. As an immortal creature that would live until this world came to an end, Akane understood very well that time changed everything. Feelings changed. People changed. Emotions that had once been strong enough to make her heart burst became stale and dull, lifeless and monochrome. It was simply how things were, and she had accepted that. But, now. Well, I suppose there's no point in worrying about what-ifs. Nodding to herself, Akane decided to let things take their natural course. Whatever happened would happen. In either event, she couldn't see herself and Naruto getting bored with their relationship for a long time. And, in the event that their relationship ever did become boring, they could just spice it up by doing something kinky. Maybe we could have a one-night stand with another person. I wonder if we could seduce Tenten. Akane, a voice said behind her. Turning her head, she saw Enko walking up to her. Oh, Mistress Chan, Akane said, grinning. Did you need something? A tick mark appeared on Enko's head. Do you really have to call me that all the time? Yes. It amuses me. Enko clicked her tongue, but she was apparently wise enough not to pursue the topic. Do you mind if I ask you something? Not at all. What do you want to know? Enko walked up to the bow and, setting her hands on the rail, gazed out at the ocean. Do you ever think about the past and wonder if you should have done things differently? She must be thinking about what happened between her and Orochimaru, Akane concluded. She didn't know much about what happened between Enko and the snake Sannin, but she knew enough. Enko had been abandoned by Orochimaru, who she'd been apprenticed to. Also, thanks to the snake Sannin's betrayal of Konoha. The average citizen didn't like her. Akane supposed that's why she liked teasing Enko so much. The woman reminded her of Naruto in that way, both were hated for something beyond their control. I never bother thinking about the past, or what I could have done differently, Akane answered honestly. The past is the past, and it's often best to leave it there. The only thing that the past is ever good for are life lessons on what to do and what not to do. If you can learn from the mistakes you made previously, then anything that happened is well worth the hardship. Then you don't regret being sealed into Naruto? Is that a trick question? Akane asked. Naruto is the man that I've chosen to love. It was my being sealed into him that allowed us to meet. Why would I regret that? But what about all of the people you've killed? What about them? I don't know anything about the people I killed, who they were, what they did, what their hopes and dreams were. I wasn't even in my right mind when I attacked Konoha. There's no sense in regretting something like that. Yawning, Akane stretched her arms above her head. While it might be my job to watch over you humans, humanity doesn't really interest me. Anko was silent for a long time. Akane didn't mind. She let the silence play out, using that time to reach into her bond with Naruto. He wasn't at Demon Island yet, and it appeared that he'd taken to singing. Ahoy, ramen. Ramen, ramen, ramen. It's so good, it's so great. I wanna eat some ramen tonight. Miso and pork go really well together, but seafood with chicken broth doesn't taste so great. Ramen, ramen, you're the only food for me. That boy, Akane thought, shaking her head in amusement. I guess you really are a demon, Anko said. There was no recrimination in her tone, but she seemed to have finally realized something: the fundamental differences between humans and Akane. However, you say that as if human beings are not capable of the same thing. I find that humanity is generally much more vile and corrupt than demons. Demons, at least, are honest in their desire to cause destruction. Most humans hide that desire behind a veneer of civility and poorly crafted concepts of justice. Leaning against the rail, Akane sought out Haku, who was on the highest point of the deck. He appeared to be looking for something. Isaribi, perhaps. In any case, I'm not really a true demon. I'm a member of the Kitsune clan, who lives in the service of an Arasama. We're not considered true demons because we serve the gods, who most of the demons are at war with. Demons and gods are at war. Anko looked like someone had sucker punched her in the face. Well, not anymore, Akane admitted. The demons and gods haven't fought for the past several hundred years, ever since we Bijou sealed the gates to the demon world. While demons occasionally slip out, most of them are weak and nothing for the gods to concern themselves over. The seal that kept demons from leaving what humans called the underworld was a powerful one. It acted like a net. Naturally, the net would have holes in it, but the holes were there on purpose. By allowing lower-level demons to slip through, they could keep the higher-level ones from getting out. It was a rather ingenious design, if Akane did say so herself. Even demons that were more powerful than her and the Bijou couldn't break it. Anko sighed and slumped against the railing. You know, the more I hear about all this, the more I wish I'd never learned of it. That's some pretty heavy stuff. There's a lot going on in this world that humans are never privy to. Akane grinned. I'll bet, Anko said dryly. Just then, the entire ship rocked as something slammed into it. Akane and Anko were able to channel chakra to their feet, and Haku had done the same, but none of the sailors were that lucky. Many of them were sent to the ground, and a few even fell overboard. What was that? Anko shouted. It seems we are being attacked, Akane said. I'm sensing multiple signatures underneath this boat. They seem to be a strange mixture of demonic energy and chakra. Did you say multiple signatures? Akane wasn't given time to answer before several figures climbed onto the boat. Green-skinned, the creatures before them were barely recognizable as having once been human. Their hands and feet were webbed, and they had gills on their necks. They were hairless, but fins on their heads were reminiscent to mohawks. What the hell are these? Anko asked as the crew began to panic. Humans that were experimented on, would be my guess, Akane said as one tried to attack her. She didn't bother using her powers and simply swatted it away. Her backslap struck it in the face, breaking its neck and sending it back into the ocean. TCH. This is just great, Enko clicked her tongue, tossing a kunai into the skull of a monster that tried to come near her. I hadn't anticipated this. But doesn't having something unexpected happen make life so much more interesting? Asked Akane as she punched an experiment in the solar plexus, causing its entire chest to cave in. You and I have a very different opinion on what makes life interesting, Enko stated. There was no more time to talk after that. The battle had begun in earnest. Pulling moisture from the air, Haku gathered water, allowing it to coalesce around several experimental monsters, taking the shape of thousands of tiny needles. The creatures didn't seem to notice the water needles. Haku didn't even think they had the mental capacity for such thoughts. Hijitsu, Sensatsu Shuisho. The water needles flew in from every direction, impaling the monsters, who didn't even moan in pain as they toppled over like broken dolls. He didn't need to check to know that they were dead. While Haku normally avoided killing, this time, he understood the truth: killing these sad, pitiful creatures was a mercy. Jiwei. Stay back. Spinning. Around, Haku withdrew several senbon from within his sleeves and threw them with unerring accuracy at another monster. This one had been harassing one of the crew, who probably would have died if Haku's needles hadn't found purchase in the creature's skull. The monster crumpled to the floor. He bounded over to the man and helped him up. Get off the deck. Go inside with everyone else and have them seal the entrance. Don't come out until I or one of my companions tells you to, he ordered. The man didn't bother to say anything. He just ran. I can't blame him for being frightened, but he could have at least said thank you. Traveling to the other side of the deck, Haku found Akane and Enko fighting off several creatures, though he didn't know if he could truly call it a fight. It might have been more accurate to call it a massacre. Akane was a killing machine. Each strike from one of her fists crushed skulls, broke ribs, and caused monsters to be sent flying. It was almost freaky how little attention she seemed to be paying to what she killed. In fact, she almost appeared bored. Enko was having to put in a bit more effort, but even she wasn't strained as she slaughtered every monster that came within 5 feet of her. It looks like they have things well in hand, in which case. This attack was clearly part of that Amachi person's plan, which meant that Isaribi was somewhere around here. I have to find her. Traveling to the side, Haku looked into the sea. There were plenty of creatures swimming around. He could see them, the monsters that lurked underneath the surface. They rose from the water and latched onto the ship, awkwardly clambering up the sides. Several would fall as they lost their grip, but most were able to climb all the way up. As he continued staring at the many monsters coming on board, one caught his eye. Unlike the others, this one wasn't doing anything. It stayed in the water, floating several meters from the ship. More than its lack of action, the feeling it gave off seemed almost human, and it appeared more feminine than the others. Isaribi. It had to be her. Haku leapt from the ship. Isaribi saw him coming and tried to dive under the water, but he used his bloodline to create a platform of ice, which pushed her out of the water's surface. Isaribi, he shouted. She froze. That's you, isn't it? You're Isaribi. Isaribi didn't say anything. Talk to me, Isaribi. Please. I want to help you. There's nothing you can do to help, Isaribi said finally. Haku didn't have time to say anything before Isaribi shot a bullet of water from her mouth. Enko was frowning as she continued to slaughter monsters left and right. A kunai to head and one creature dropped. Several snakes with enough venom to put down a tiger caused several more to collapse. Contorting her body like a snake, she avoided the haphazard attacks of her foes, then came back up, 2 kunai launching into her hands from wrist launchers hidden by her coat, which she impaled 2 creatures through the chin with. Glancing over at Akane revealed the demoness to be handedly defeating all of her opponents. The woman yawned as one of the creatures tried to attack her. She almost absently raised her hand, as if seeking to stretch, but her clawed nails raked through the creature's face with ease. As the monster died, Akane stepped on it, crushing its skull, yet she appeared to be paying more attention to getting the blood off her nails than the monster whose head she just crushed. That woman is frightening. Shotan, Shuriken Ranbu, a voice called out. Anko leapt away from the place where she'd been standing. She was just in time to avoid getting impaled by several hundred crystal shuriken, which became embedded into the wood. Humph, you're as quick to flee as always. How ugly. Anko looked up and growled when she saw who it was. It's you. I knew you were involved in all this. Is that bastard Orochimaru here, too? Don't be stupid. Guren scoffed. Orochimaru-sama wouldn't bother coming to this rundown shithole. Even I'm only here to erase the secrets of this place from memory. Now, then. Guren's lips curled as a dozen crystal spikes appeared around her. Dance for me. Naruto had grown tired of singing, so with a kip in his step and chakra to his feet, he blasted off the water's surface and practically flew towards his destination. He ended up creating a really big wave. Standing on Demon Island, the first thing that Naruto noticed was the complete lack of life. It wasn't just that there were no animals around. The plant life had also died out completely. Even further in, the island remained a desolate place, filled with rocks and a canyon. Naruto walked across the craggy shore, entering a small canyon that he had to squeeze through. There was only one path to follow, so follow it he did, until he eventually located what he believed was the entrance to a madman's secret lair. The door that Naruto stood in front of was massive and unwieldy. It was also terribly conspicuous. A giant block of rounded steel, dull and rusted, but still appearing sturdy, had been embedded into the bedrock of the mountain. Sensors of some kind ran along the dirty metal surface. Naruto even saw a camera in the center of the door, which tracked him as he moved. With that camera, whoever's in charge of this place probably already knows I'm here. Grinning, Naruto cracked his knuckles. I guess that means there's no need to be subtle. Putting enough chakra into his right fist to produce an Oedoma Rasengan, Naruto slammed his fist into the door. There was a loud bang. Like pealing thunder before the entire wall around the door split apart. Cracks appeared in the rock upon which the door was built into, and the door itself became warped around Naruto's fist before it was sent flying into the darkened passage beyond. As light from the sun spilled in through the abrasions now splitting the mountain, Naruto walked into the evil lair, whistling a jaunty tune. The tunnel that he found himself definitely made him think evil base for a psychotic mastermind. It was dark and damp, and the air was cold. If it weren't for his enhanced eyes, there'd be no way for him to see 10 feet in any direction, especially since the light that spilled and disappeared the further he got from the entrance. Maybe I should have put more power into my attack. Oh, well. Naruto eventually reached another door and, a grin splitting his face in half, decided to be even more showy. He materialized his blade and shifted into a standard Ijutsu stance. Uzumaki Hijitsu, Sekai. The sound of a blade exiting its sheath preceded the giant door being vertically split in half. There were not nearly enough cuts, in his humble opinion, so Naruto then sliced his blade 16 more times in rapid succession. The door was then sliced into 32 separate pieces. Naruto slid the blade back into his sheath, then dismissed his sword entirely and stepped through the now doorless entrance. It was like walking into a mad scientist's lair, which made sense, as whoever resided here was clearly of the mad scientist variety. Vats filled with glowing green liquid lit the room. Bodies in various stages of mutation filled each vat, floating lifelessly like inanimate dolls. Computer consoles scrolled through information that Naruto would never understand. In the center of this room stood a man. He was a very ugly man. His stooped posture denoted someone who stood slouched over computers all day, and his stringy hair combined with beady eyes lent him an untrustworthy appearance. His large nose also took up most of his face. Yes, this man was not that attractive. The man gawked at Naruto as he walked further into the room, but he quickly recovered and took several steps back. You. Who are you? You. Don't really expect me to answer that, do you? Naruto asked incredulously. Seriously, a man breaks into your lab in the flashiest way possible, destroying your doors in the process, and you're asking him who he is? Are you an idiot? The man, who Naruto guessed was Amachi, gritted his teeth. You snotty little brat. Don't mock me. I am a genius beyond your comprehension. Is that right? Naruto asked dryly. You may think you have me cornered, but I've become more powerful than anyone could ever imagine. Amachi screamed, and then he changed. Naruto observed the man as his skin turned green and scaly, he lost all of his hair, and gills appeared on his neck. He looked like the illegitimate love child between a fish and human. Ugly barely scratched the surface of his appearance now. Do you see this? This is power. With this transformation, I will control the seas and dash. Having grown tired of listening to the man rant, Naruto put on an intense burst of speed, recalled his sword, and slashed straight through the man's body. He could feel his blade cut through flesh, muscle, and bone with the same ease. As if he was cutting through paper. After running Amachi through, Naruto flicked his blade, blood splattering everywhere, then slowly sheathed it. Click. Gurk. Blood sprayed from the man's truncated torso as the upper half of his body slid off, hitting the ground with a wet thud. Naruto turned around and watched the legs also fall to the ground as a bloody puddle spread underneath the body. Well, Naruto started, scratching the back of his head, that was anticlimactic. Moving over to one of the computers, Naruto dug around in his weapon holster. Let's see. I think it's in here. No. Not it. Anaha. Here it is. Pulling out what appeared to be a tiny stick with a slot, Naruto plugged it into the computer and watched as numbers appeared on the screen. I think that means it's doing what it's supposed to, he mumbled. Does this mean I just have to wait until it's done? Resigning himself to playing the waiting game, Naruto was about to sit down. When a low rumbling caused him to pause. Blinking, he waited for several more seconds, then went to sit down again. Gruggergufurg. The noise came again. What is that? Naruto asked no one in particular. Standing up, Naruto looked down at the computer. It looked like the memory stick thingy was done loading up all the data. He unplugged it and placed it inside of his thigh holster. Following the sound, he wandered through a door, which led to a set of stairs that he walked down. As he moved further into the evil lair, the sound grew louder. Gruggergurgurg. It sounds like someone's having a bad case of indigestion, Naruto muttered as he opened a door and walked into a new room. This one was cylindrical and much larger than the lab that he'd left. The floor was made of grating, so he could see the bottom, or he would have been able to see the bottom, had it not been so dark that even his enhanced vision couldn't pierce it. Walking further into the room, Naruto listened to the sound of his footfalls thunking along the metal floor. He frowned as a strange feeling came over him. It wasn't a danger sense, not quite, but the hairs on his neck had risen. Gruggergurgurg. That sounds like it's coming from below me, Naruto muttered. He looked down. He was just in time to see a massive mouth appear out of the darkness before he and the floor were consumed. Haku's frustration caused him to grit his teeth. Several water bullets came at him, but he wove around them with ease. Their trajectories were too predictable and the attacks moved too slowly. There was simply no way he couldn't dodge them. That being said, it wasn't the water bullets that caused him to become vexed. It was the one shooting at him. Stop it, Isaribi. Please. Isaribi didn't stop. She spat several more bullets at him, and Haku danced through the miniature hailstorm, skating along the water's surface. He could have attacked her, but he didn't. His goal wasn't to defeat Isaribi but to make her see. Reason. He wanted to help her, although it looked like his help wasn't wanted, or rather, Isaribi was denying his help out of desperation. Please, Isaribi. You don't need to do this. Shut up. Isaribi finally shouted. Just shut up. Stop talking. You don't understand. I do need to do this. This is the only way I'll ever be normal again. Amachi said he'll change me back, that I just need to do this one last job and I can go back to the way I was. I have to do this. Haku did not believe that this Amachi character would change her back after this mission. Why would he? He had no reason to, and since he was the one who changed her in the first place, he probably had no desire to either. More than likely, after this mission, Amachi would simply make her do more missions. He might even kill her after this, if he decided that she wasn't worth the trouble. He could have told her all of that. But he didn't. Even if he does change you back, will that change how the villagers treat you? Haku asked. Do you think they'll welcome you back with open arms once you're normal again? Isaribi suddenly appeared uncertain. She raised a hand to her chest, as if to clutch at her heart. Haku's compassionate smile stopped any words that she may have said from coming out. I understand how you feel. You believe that by becoming normal again, the villagers will accept you. But human beings aren't that kind. Even if you walk through town without those bandages, they won't treat you any differently than they do now. You won't gain the acceptance you're looking for. No. Isaribi shook her head as she took several steps back. That's not true. It is, and I think you know that. Isaribi sank to her knees, her legs seemingly unable to keep her upright. She pressed her hands to her face as tears leaked from her eyes. Haku felt his throat constrict. He hadn't wanted to hurt her, but he wanted her to see the truth, to understand that what she was doing right now was wrong, and that it wouldn't help her achieve her dream. Then what am I supposed to do? Isaribi asked, though whether she was talking to him or herself, Haku didn't know. Going back to the way I was has been my only goal for months. It's all I have. Tell me, she glared at Haku through tear-stained eyes, what am I supposed to do? Haku needed a moment before giving her an answer. Truth be told, he hadn't thought that far ahead. His only goal was getting Isaribi to see the truth and helping her get out from under Amachi's yoke. He hadn't considered what would happen afterward. But maybe. Come with me, Haku said. Isaribi looked startled. What? Come back to Konoha with me, Haku repeated. In Konoha, you'll be able to start over. You won't have to worry about prejudice, or being treated like a pariah because of your abilities. And if you come back with me, then I'll protect you. Isaribi's face, stained with tears, gained a bright red blush. You will protect me? Haku also began blushing, but he didn't back down. That's right. I'll protect you, and I'll introduce you to all the wonderful people I know. You'll be able to make friends and live the life that should have always been yours. Haku held out his hand. So just come back with me. Isaribi stared at his hand for the longest time, her cheeks growing steadily more red. Haku didn't know what she was thinking, but her stare unnerved him. It made him want to squirm uncomfortably. Still, he continued to offer his hand, even though he felt lightheaded enough to faint. Okay, I'll go with you, she said softly. She reached out and took his hand. Sanaijishu. 5 snakes shot out of Enko's arm and tried to bite Guren. Shoton, Shuishotu. A crystallized blade appeared on Guren's forearm. Ducking under the first snake, she sliced its head off, then spun out of the way when another snake attacked and cut it in half. As the third one came in, Guren raised her arm. The snake was split down the middle by her blade. 2 more snakes came in front either side, but she twirled around like a whirlwind, using chakra to increase the speed of her spin. The snakes became sashimi before her blade. Is that all you've got? I'm disappointed in an apprentice of Orochimarusama. Shoton, Hasho Koryu. The water around Guren rose into the air before crystallizing. As more water was crystallized, a shape began to form, long and serpentine, with a scaly appearance and a head that had twin horns jutting from either side. It was a dragon with glowing green eyes. Anko went through several hand seals as the dragon launched itself at her. Salt water sprayed everywhere as the dragon rushed her, the scent invading her nose and the salt stinging her eyes. She leapt into the air, avoiding its lunge, but all that meant was that she was suspended in midair and had nowhere to run. However, this allowed her to finish her hand seals. Katan, Karyu Enden. Kneading chakra into her lungs, Anko expelled a massive gout of fire from her mouth, which took the shape of a dragon as it was released. Anko felt the hair on her arms being singed as the fiery beast roared. She wasn't very good at controlling fire jutsu. Still, she continued pouring chakra into her attack, making the dragon larger and more powerful. Then she launched the attack at the crystal dragon. The two dragons met in the center amidst an explosion. Hot air pushed outwards in a shock wave, slamming into Anko and sending her flying higher into the air. Reorienting herself, she landed feet first on the water's surface, but she was forced to move immediately after as Guren launched several dozen crystal needles at her. "So, you actually can do more than run," Guren said, laughing. "Although it doesn't look like you've got much more left to give. You used up a lot of chakra from that last attack, didn't you?" "I still have more than enough to beat you," Anko declared. Yet even though she was putting up a confident front, she knew the truth. She was running low on chakra. Anko was a special jonin. Unlike regular jonin, who had well-rounded skills, she specialized in a single area. Because of this, she lacked the power of most regular jonin. She also had to contend with the cursed seal of heaven, which put a strain on her body and constantly drained her chakra reserves. Because of that, she only had about half the amount of chakra that she should have had. Kesho, Rakuku Shuriken, Ranbu. Anko swore as Guren threw a vast amount of crystal shuriken at her. She tried to dodge, but their flight paths were so erratic that she couldn't predict their movements. A swift sidestep resulted in a shuriken cutting her left arm, leaving a deep gouge. She flipped over another shuriken, but that resulted in a different shuriken tearing through her stomach. While it wasn't deep, it still stung. Two more shuriken came in side by side. She dodged them both, only to discover that another shuriken had been hidden in the shadows. Fire spread through her left thigh as the shuriken found its mark. Anko yelped as she fell to a knee. Wincing, she grabbed the shuriken and pulled it out, grunting as pain flared in her nerves. She glared up at Guren, who went through a series of hand seals and grinned. "Looks like this is the end for you." Kesho, Kyodai Rekiku Shuriken. Anko grimaced when crystal coalesced into Guren's hand, forming a giant shuriken that resembled a snowflake. As her enemy threw the projectile at her, she tried to move, but it appeared that Guren hadn't just been randomly aiming when she launched those smaller shuriken. Her last attack must have struck a nerve or something. Her leg refused to move. "Damn it! She got me good. There's nothing more that I can do." With feelings of helpless consuming her, Anko resigned herself to her fate. "Sorry, Hokage-sama. It looks like your trust was misplaced." The crystal shattered. Anko and Guren said at the same time. Having been the one to destroy the shuriken with her bare fist, Akane stood between them. With her relaxed posture and predatory smile, even without her tails and ears out, the redhead looked every bit the demigoddess. My, Akane said, grinning, "I never would have expected to find a crystal user again. I had believed that your kind had died out several hundred years ago. This is an unexpected surprise." Guren frowned. "Who are you?" "The dead have no need to know my name," Akane stated. Guren clicked her tongue. "You're a cocky bitch, aren't you?" "But of course. Akane smiled, showing sharp canines. After all, this bitch is currently the strongest existence in this world. A pathetic excuse for a ninja like you is hardly even worth my time. Akane nearly broke character when Guren snarled. It was so interesting to see how easy it was to rile her opponents up. A few insults here, a small illusion that affected the brain there, and voila, one angry enemy. Hardly worth your time, huh? We'll see about that. Shotan, Amiwatari no Jutsu. After running through a string of hand seals, Guren placed her hands on the water's surface. Akane raised an eyebrow when a long stream of crystallized spikes shot from the surface with a splash. All of the spikes were traveling straight at her, but that was fine. It didn't matter what this woman tried. It would all end the same way. Akane channeled her energy into her hands. Red chakra bubbled out of her pores, encasing her hands. The redness extended past her nails, sharpening into points. As the spikes continued to come at her, she swiped her hand at them, and 5 massive crescents of energy tore from her hands. They blasted apart the spikes, annihilating them, then continued on, slamming into Guren before she could even think of moving. Standing beside her, Enko gaped as Guren was engulfed in red light. As the 5 crescents, their shape reminiscent of giant claws, tore into Guren's body, obliterating her, Akane nodded in satisfaction. There. She nodded to herself. That takes care of her. Enko looked at where Guren had been. There was nothing left anymore. She shook her head. You really are a demon, aren't you? Akane smirked. I prefer the term demigoddess myself. Enko-sensei. Akane-san. Haku called out as he walked over to them. Akane turned to face the boy, and her grin widened when she saw who was with him. Oh, my. You two look awfully lovely together, just like a prince and his princess. Haku was carrying Isaribi. She was cradled in his arms like a newlywed bride, and they must have both only realized this after her comment, because their cheeks lit up like nightlights. That Isaribi can't walk on water, Haku justified himself. You could always carry her on your back, Akane suggested. Or do you enjoy the feel of having her in your arms? As Isaribi's cheeks turned into a bonfire, Haku sputtered nonsensically. Akane chuckled. She loved embarrassing people. It was so much fun. Anyway, let's return back to the ship, Enko suggested before Akane could further entertain herself at Haku and Isaribi's expense. Fine. Fine. Akane sighed. Spoil my fun, why don't you? Your fun would have us here for hours while you mercilessly tease these two, Enko deadpanned. You say that like you wouldn't do it either. When Enko didn't answer her, Akane held up her hands and made a sign with her fingers. Opening his eyes, Naruto stared at the pink ceiling above him. It was a very unusual, almost organic shade of pink. It made him think of a tongue, except this was a little darker and had ridges running along it. As he continued to stare at the ceiling, he tried to recall where he was and how he'd ended up here. Bits and pieces returned to him. It didn't take long to remember what happened. Fuck, I've been swallowed by a demon. He was never going to tell Akane about this. Ever. If she knew, oh, he could just imagine how much she would tease him. Standing up, his feet unsteady on the loamy ground, which he realized was likely the inside of an intestine or something, Naruto looked around. The place where he found himself in looked a lot like a maze. There were numerous twists and turns, platforms built into the monster's insides, and several membranes that almost reminded him of doors. He frowned. I need to find a way out of this place, but I can't spend too much time wandering around looking for an exit. Naruto thought about his options. There weren't many. As unfortunate as it was, only 2 options seemed to present themselves. 1, he could search the inside of this creature, locate its mouth, and force his way out. 2, he could simply bust his way out right now by using one of his more powerful techniques. I'd rather use one of my techniques and simply blow this thing up from the inside out. However, if I did that. If he did that, Naruto would also blow up Demon Island. No one lived on the island, so he didn't think anyone would mind terribly, but he'd been trying to avoid rearranging the landscape. I guess there's no helping it. After taking a deep breath, Naruto slowly opened the floodgates to his chakra. Unlike a normal human, he was only half human, and therefore, his chakra was vastly different from a human's. Aside from his reserves being a lot larger, his chakra was far more potent. Naruto gritted his teeth as he felt his own chakra pushing against him. It was like an omnidirectional force. The world around him slowly bowed. The insides of the demon that had eaten him groaned as his chakra pushed against it. Struggling, Naruto forced his chakra to condense, to become smaller. The force soon left, the area he was reverting to normal. A condensed ball of chakra hovered between his palms. It looked reminiscent to a Rasengan, but it wasn't a ball of chakra being rotated in multiple directions. Luminescent like the sun, it was simply a tiny sphere filled with enough chakra to create a temple-sized Rasengan. Taking a deep breath, Naruto prepared to use a technique that he didn't think he'd ever find a use for. Hijitsu, Bokyaku. As Naruto released his technique, the world became engulfed in a bright light. They had just climbed onto the ship when Akane felt a massive surge of Naruto's chakra. She didn't know what he was using so much for, but she knew that, whatever it was being used for, the results were going to be catastrophic. "Get down, you three!" Akane shouted as she tackled Enko, Isaribi, and Haku to the deck. "What the hell? Akane, what are you?" Enko was unable to say anymore. Rather, her voice was overwhelmed by the massive shockwave that slammed into the boat. The wind howled in their ears. Akane, whose hearing was far more sensitive than anyone else's, whimpered as she felt her eardrums burst. The intense shock wave was followed by a blinding flash of light. Akane closed her eyes and rode out the torrential winds hitting their vessel. She could feel the wind tearing at her back. The vessel bucked like a bull, and she could imagine the waves that were slamming into them. Salt water sprayed everywhere, invading her nose and soaking her clothes. The fierce winds eventually died down, and the rocking stopped as the sea calmed down. Akane lifted her head and opened her eyes to observe her surroundings. The mast had been destroyed, the railings had been ripped apart, and it looked like they would need a new steering wheel, but the ship was in surprisingly good shape aside from that. She stood up. Slowly, warily, the other three stood up as well. "What the hell just hit us?" Enko asked as she looked around in shock. Haku and Isaribi seemed impressed as well, judging from their gaping expressions. "That would be one of Naruto's techniques," Akane admitted. Everyone's head snapped over to her. "One of Naruto's? You're kidding," Haku said. "I wish I was." Akane pointed off into the distance, toward Demon Island's geographical location. "Look." Enko, Isaribi, and Haku looked at where she was pointing. They frowned. "I don't see anything," Enko said. "Exactly," Akane stated. "You don't see anything. Not Demon Island, not Jiro Island, or Taro Island. Because they've just been obliterated." In the wake of her statement, only Enko had the ability to speak. Holy flying fuck monkeys. After hooking up with his comrades, Naruto was given an earful from Akane, Enko, and Haku about responsibly using his powers. They had apparently not been very happy with how he'd destroyed 3 islands for what they had dubbed as no reason. Naturally, he couldn't tell them the true reason either, though he did say there was a powerful demon that had given him trouble. When Akane asked about the demon, he'd only been able to describe it as, big with large teeth. "I did as you asked and downloaded all of the information from the database onto this memory stick," Naruto said as they all sat around a table eating. Isaribi was with them, sitting next to Haku, acting timid. Naruto had tried to say hi, but she just hid behind Haku and ignored him. What an odd girl. I'm glad to see you can at least remember to follow directions, even if you can't stop yourself from going completely overboard. Anko grabbed the memory stick and pocketed it in her thigh holster. That's not a very nice thing to say. It's not like I was trying to destroy the islands. Naruto pouted. And in any case, I only did as you asked because I'm expecting a reward. I expect you to let Akane and I in bed with you. Not happening, Anko stated flatly. You're an awfully cruel mistress, Akane pouted. You shut up. Anko stood up and pointed an accusing finger at Akane. Isaribi squirmed as everyone turned to her. What happened to Amachi? You mean that scientist guy with the big nose and beady eyes? Naruto asked. Isaribi nodded. I killed him. She gawked. What? He was asking for it. But he was going to dash. No, he wasn't. Naruto interrupted. What? He wasn't going to turn you back. Crossing his arms, Naruto frowned, giving him a wolfish appearance. While I didn't read everything that was being uploaded, I did catch some anecdotes about you. Apparently, your only purpose was to help further his research. After that, he planned on killing you. No. That's... Naruto sighed. He felt bad for the girl, truly, but sugar-coating this issue wasn't going to make it better. Like a band-aid, the best way to solve this problem was to get it over with all at once. Fortunately, Isaribi had Haku for support. I know it's tough to accept, but scum like Amachi don't keep promises like that. They have no reason to. In any case, now that we have that memory stick filled with data from Amachi's research, we may be able to find someone who can fix you up. Isaribi sniffled as Haku rested a hand on her shoulder. Really? Possibly, Naruto said. There's a chance that nothing will change you back, but there's also a chance that someone out there can take the research and fix you. Even if you can't, the people of Konoha will accept you, Haku said. And I'll be with you, so you don't need to worry. Haku. Ah, that is just so cute, Akane teased. You two make such a nice couple. As Haku and Isaribi did their best impressions of a boiling lobster, Naruto nodded in agreement. Truly, they make a lovely couple. There's even a touching story behind it. The compassionate ninja who rescued a girl drowning in sorrow and loneliness so similar to his own. Yes, it's a wonderful tale of triumph and love in the making. We should give it a name, Akane said. How about, the Snow Ninja and the Fish? Fish? Isaribi didn't seem to like her title. No. Naruto shook his head. Fish doesn't sound very romantic. What about, the Yuki Shinobi and the Mermaid? Akane thought it over. It does have a nice ring to it, but perhaps we should switch out Yuki for Snow. I think it would work better in this instance. I see. Then. The Snow Ninja and the Mermaid. I like it, Akane decided. It has such a lovely ring to it, and now we have a good story to tell everyone back home. Don't you dare tell anyone that story. Haku demanded. Relax, we're not gonna give any names, Naruto said, grinning. Although we might tell Zabuza. I think he'd be interested to know that his little apprentice is all grown up. Akane placed a hand on Haku's shoulder and, in her best Zabuza impersonation, said, Haku, I'm so proud of you. Finally, after years of thinking you were into dudes, you have become a man. Haku's face, redder than a fire jutsu, began emitting steam. Would you two cut it out? His cry echoed futilely across the sea. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to like, share and subscribe. This is Raven Sage signing off.